Welcome to Watercolor Wednesday. I'm Kathy Futrell, and today we're going to be painting, first of all drawing, an egret with a dark background, light against dark. Let's get started today. I've actually begun a study of the egret, but I'm going to redraw it to show you how I got to this point. So right now I have resist on the egret to keep it as white as possible, as light as possible, but I'm going to draw the egret and show the stage again. And from here, what you will do, and I have a little handout from an egret photo, and I have a sailboat from Claude Monet of 1885, which is going to be our inspiration for another opportunity, but today it is the egret. So what I begin with is knowing that I'm going to do a vertical painting, not a horizontal one, because the bird itself is like a tree. There's more emphasis in the up and down than there is in the horizontal. So what I want to do is sort of look at the halfway point of half of the bird is facing with its nose in this direction, and the other half has the body with a tail. So I want to leave room for this body, but at the same time I don't want the nose to touch the edge of the paper. So I'm beginning just past the halfway point with the head, and I'm going to just observe the shape of the neck and just do my little pencil sketch, creating this feeling of the egret's posture. And there'll be this, let's finish the head here. So I think this has a feeling of flatness right here, and the neck is pretty consistent as far as the thickness that we have here. So you want to, my sketching kind of has, I'm looking at the negative space because the body of the bird comes very close in this area right here, kind of like an S curve. And then I have a very straight line that goes from right here at this neck point all the way out to the beak. And I tilted mine up just a hair, and I keep thinking I should extend this head a little more. I don't mind adjusting because I want the sketch to be, I want the proportion of the bird to be right, even if I have to erase, which every now and then we do have to do that. So I end up with several lines. There is a little space here with a beak and a little nostril. See right here? So I'm really looking at all of the shapes, and then the eye. And there's quite a bit of white around the head. This is a little tiny eye shape. And if I'm lucky, I can keep a little spot of light right there. And this is a dark little cap and a white line. So we're going to talk about how do we keep these whites. And there are two ways. Two ways. All right, so this neck, I'm going to bring this down, and there are all these lovely white lines that will be against the dark. And as I said, there are several ways of creating that. When I was sketching the bird this morning to get ready, I thought I'm going to do a negative painting today. And the more I think about it, the more I think, am I going to be able to get around all of those light shapes? For example, in here, there are lighter lines that represent these feathers that are hanging down. There's also this edge of light that I do not want to lose. And then we have the legs, and the legs present their own little problem because they have lights here as well. So I'm going to try to give you options today with how you approach, but right now I am drawing to prepare for painting negatively. Now this leg seems to extend in this direction, and the legs are right here on a tree branch, probably. Okay, so I have that line to create across the page, and I have another line up here that I choose to go a little higher. I don't like putting anything in the middle, so it's really about right here. I just chose to raise it up a little bit. Okay, so this represents the background, and there is some Spanish moss, even though this is going to be quite blurry, and there's some light places. This is just so that I can remember to put a few details in, because this is a very dark background. Now, there's two approaches to doing this painting. One is to go ahead and paint the bird and then work the background around it. Number two is to paint the background and then paint the bird. So I'm showing you two ways of doing it. So I'm going to begin with painting around the bird for this one, and then I'm going to come back and show you, once this dries, I'll do a little bit over here, and then I'll come back to this one. So wetting the background, actually what I'm going to do when I start the bird is I'm going to need puddles of very light colors. What I'm going to need for the background is a lot of dark, so I'm going to begin with the dark. So I'm going to work with Viridian Green, which you can see is a very bright green, and there's no such thing as this Viridian Green in this background. No such thing. So I have to make a color that represents what's going on in here. And to do that, I can add burnt sienna, which will dull this green down to a more realistic green. And, or I could actually add magenta or a red or a purple, which purple is just adding red and blue. And the darker I get, the more realistic I actually get with a dark color that will be part of my background. Now, the other thing I want to do is I want to have some lights in there to begin with, and that would be with my Skips green, or if you have something that's a yellow green, that's a good way to start. So I also see in here a little bit of this, I call it gray, and to make a nice gray, I would work with an orange and a blue, just to get that feeling of what I would say is like Spanish moss, okay? And so I'm trying to suggest that Spanish moss before I do anything else, because I'm going to work around that just a little bit. And I also see some of that lighter green in this area, and I want it to be part of some changes that happen maybe along the shore. So I really have to paint around the bird. So I'm doing this not a wet and wet, but a very wet wash. Now those were my lighter colors. I sense that I need to go with a little lighter color down here without painting over the bird leg. And that means that I just move across in a horizontal way with, at the same time, I said horizontal, and now I'm going up and down because I've got to get between these bird legs, and then I can come back with my strokes in this direction. And then my hand is right over what I'm doing. So this is going to help with the feeling of kind of reflections, and I'm just stroking up and down a little bit. Okay, now we're going to get dark. So that was my light brush. Here is my dark, and I know I did not mix enough dark up, because once I jump in here, I am really going to have to be pretty darn dark. Okay, so the dark greens are greens which, as I pointed out when I was doing my mixing, I'm going to integrate just a little bit of light green through here. So there's so many different ways of making green. Green is blue and yellow, but it's also taking a green that you have and adding blue, or adding red or brown, burnt sienna in the case. So I'm carefully moving through and around this bird just a little bit with my light. When I come back with the dark, and I'm trying not to lose the lights, and also saying to myself, don't outline that. Just let it run and work around your egret. Okay, I know I don't have enough dark. That's a nice dark right there. And this will define the shape. Now, as soon as you outline, move it up and down. And so it does mean that you have to work quick and that you have to have your puddles. Okay, I'm going to go across. I don't want that to look like it's out. Boy, that's just a whole dark area. I'm going to be mixing and mixing. Now that I should have wet my paint first, and then I would not have to do quite so much. I want to blend.
Yeah, Larry did.
What?
He came in early and did it, didn't you?
What's that? No, I didn't do that.
He wet everything. I know.
That is actually Larry is a very wise man. Not just to have, not just to be the only gentleman in this whole class, but have his birthday next week. But the other thing is this, that he knows that if he wets his paint, that sounds kind of rough, that your colors are a lot more vibrant, and they come out of your set a lot easier, no matter if you're using cake or your paints that are, I use tube paints, but any kind of paint. Now remember, this was the land here. So I am really paying attention to my background and how dark I get for all of this. So without really spending the entire time so that you don't get to paint, I'm just going to do a little bit more of this background because I think you get the picture, no pun intended, and you will know what to do to work around to get your, what I do honestly is I observe what I'm painting, and for instance right here, this is tricky. If you're doing negative painting, you've got to really watch how you leave your negative spaces. So I was able to work around the white, the light feathery pieces, and keep most of those. And notice that right here I've got to do some blending and pull this out as quick as I can and mix again. So really get your puddles, because this is drying. This is dry. This is a very dark area right here. And notice that even though I have to come up and down sometimes, I am also moving. Water has to be going back and forth. Now, right here is a little lighter spot. I'll show you how I do that. So my lighter spot is right here, and I take my lighter color and I work that in.
Is it always back and forth?
Well, because water is flat. No, I do remember a while ago I did pull some strokes down, but in the end you really want your strokes to have that back and forth, simply because it's flat. Now, remember, this is a watercolor painting. We're not making a photograph. We're making an interpretation of this landscape. So I'm going to go darker here, and then I'm going to blend some of my lighter color. And this will, work. I don't want those edges to show, so I'm doing it as quickly as I can. If you get a hard edge like right there, just keep lifting by going over it. And again, because we're working around these legs to keep our lights, we have to, it's like the tree, the dog that goes behind the tree. He has to, you can't just put the head coming out from behind the tree. You also have to show the tail. So whatever's over here has got to be over here. Whatever's here has got to be over there. So that's the challenge you have when you do any kind of negative painting, is to keep working your colors. Now, there's a lot of hard edge here, and this will need to be softened and blended, and we just keep building up. Remember, the technique of watercolor is light to dark. So obviously we're working lighter to darker. I jumped right in with the dark because I knew that I had to get there. If that's not dark enough, I will have to go over it again, and as many times as it is necessary. And I'm sensing that I need to bring some of this dark here and blend and do a little blending. Okay, so you can see that this is a bit of a back and forth between the light and the dark, rather from light to dark or rather from dark to more dark. It just depends what you have to see in your translation. I'm not going to finish over here. I'm just going to leave this to dry, and we'll see. This is kind of a little out of focus because the bird is the thing that's going to be in focus. That's your background. So let's go back to the bird as I had created the resist. I'm going to show you just a little bit of difference, and then I'll let this dry for a second and I'll come back to it. So if you are working this way, I would basically do the same for the background after you painted the bird. But this case, when I'm working with all these dark colors, is this, can you see the whole painting right here? Okay. When I'm working with all these darks and all the light, so I had a light green and I had a dark green, and I would just keep doing that back and forth between the two because there is a little bit of that light green that wants to show through. The thing is, when I'm doing the feathers, these have been resisted. And the way I created the resist, and I'll show you that. Ooh, that is really dark. But I like it, so I'm going to keep it. And I just keep going with, wow, you never know what's going to happen when you start painting. Oh my goodness. I think that's why we might still be painting, you know. Now I've got to work around, but let's just say I can stop at any point. And the best thing to do when you want to stop is just add water and just let it go down. So I need to come back to this painting and finish up, but I want this to dry so I can show you how I remove the masking pen. Now, the masking is a form of using a resist. And we've been talking about a resist, and we have done this resist before. And I find, and I put a star on it this morning because it's the only one out of all my tubes that would actually work. Now, what I have to do sometimes, you have to keep this little needle here inside, and you have to keep it from getting clogged up. And I have learned the secret is to find some florist wire, and you can unstop. It used to be Jim, my husband, who could unstop any tube I had, but I will be able to push this down, and then sometimes I have to open this end and use the wire to push up inside to get it to open. But this one does work. So if I wanted to create a resist, I can put this on a dry area. And there is if you notice, there's a lot of white on the top of the body. There is a lot of light on the top. Oops, there's a bubble. There's a lot of light on the top of the head here. Okay, so when that dries, of course, it's sort of redundant for me to do that now because I already have painted around the bird. But this is how you would do the resist. Now, let's paint the bird, ignoring...
Kathy, do you ever use a gel pen?
I have that gel pen, and that's in case this doesn't work. Right, you're absolutely right. And we'll do that with this bird when this dries. Yes, it's, what's that? These are white pens. These are pens that paint white. Now, I love this, I shouldn't say the word love, but absolutely, I have not been able to live without my Masky Fluid pen. However, before I used that, I always painted negatively, and I didn't worry about trying to be controlling with this pen. But I have resisted using these pens only in emergencies, and that's when you just lose all your white. Now, I'm lifting this up, and simply because I want to finish painting the bird and just do a negative painting with you, but I wanted you to see how I did do the resist. So for example, when this dries, I can peel this away with my fingers or with my eraser, and you will see how the resist helps to get that. So let's talk about the beauty of this bird. Now you can tell that as this background begins to dry, it's not quite dark enough. It needs to go with another layer. And that's going to be your challenge, to make a really dark area that mixes the light green and the dark green, and even suggest what's going on in the background without. And it really does need to be kind of blurry. Now the beauty of this neck is this gray color. So at this point, I'm going to move these brushes over. I'm going to use a round brush. I actually would use a flat, but I don't feel like cleaning my brush. So I'm going to use, let's see, they're both about the same size. This is my Aurelian. This is my Aurelian yellow. And I'm going to do 3 primary colors, and you've heard me talk about this before. Aurelian, and that's a transparent yellow. Rose Madder, and that's a transparent red. And I'm cleaning my brush, my Cobalt Blue. So usually I don't put my blue over here with my warm colors. I keep my blues and greens over here, but I've got a mess and I might want to come back to it. So I'm going to use, these are my 3 primary colors, and they're transparent colors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix them, but I'm going to mix them on the paper. So I start with this yellow, and I don't want that yellow to be really strong. Am I still, can you see my photo? And you can see, this is how I made the neck here, okay? So I'm starting with my pale yellow, okay? And I move the yellow, I sense a little more yellow right here, and I'm keeping away from the white, and I'm going to move this yellow down because it's a gray color that I really have. But I do not see any yellow in the rest. Oh, I see yellow here. I see yellow in the legs. Actually, I see orange. So give me a second. I have an idea. So I'm going to take my Rose Madder while this is still wet, and I'm going to add my I see a lot of red right there, and I see a lot of red right here. Okay, so I have my Rose Madder. Some of these strokes have a little rose. All right, so I'm going to take the red and the yellow together and make my orange. And this beak is an orange color. Actually, the tip of it looks a little more yellow. Maybe it's not quite that strong right there. It sort of blends. And then I see just the yellow on the tip. Okay, yellow on the tip. Right here. Okay, now I'm going to go to the blue. Oh, no, I'm going to do the legs. So I use my yellow and my red and give it kind of there's some light on that. That's why I did a little resist with that one. And I can make this darker and just get that color on the legs to start with, because they will be darker. Then I take my blue, and that's my Cobalt Blue, and I sense, now I haven't put the cap on, there's a dark, right here there's a dark cap. I'm going to just put the blue here and add the blue coming. Feels a little heavy, so I'm going to add some water and just drag that down, and keeping the white outline on the neck, picking up a little more blue right here and bringing that blue all the way down. This is mixing my gray on the paper. So yes, it's a white egret, but it's in shadow. And the next thing I'm going to do is use pretty much a blue. Now this morning I decided it had a little yellow and a little red in the body, and then after I finished I decided, no, I wish I had just kept that blue. So my second chance here is to say that this is going to be blue, and I'm going to let that mingle here.
What color blue is that?
Cobalt.
Cobalt.
Cobalt is your transparent blue. And I'm now leaving where I see white along the edge. Cobalt, Rose Madder, and Aurelian are your most transparent colors. Anytime you add water to any paint, it becomes transparent, but the characteristic of those colors are that they are more transparent than any of the other colors in your palette. Now, I have a darker blue spot right here, and I sense these lighter places within the feathers that are coming straight down, and I have a few pencil marks to help remind me not to cover up all of the blue. And of course down here I get a darker blue going on. And while I have this nice and wet, I am going to integrate a little more dark blue where I sense that dark blue in the bird, in the egret. Okay, so it's building up the painting by getting the bird started, and then that detail will come by adding the dark. So let's see, I can add the darks here probably, or I can add them here. Let's see if this is dry enough to remove. It's still a little damp, but I'll go for it anyway. For instance, I painted over the resist here, so I can take this off. Now, it doesn't make much sense for me to remove this side because I haven't put anything dark against it, but it does make sense for me to show you the removal here because this is on top of my dark blue. Okay, so you can see how lovely that is. And you're able to remove the white and keep your white just by using the resist. So it's a choice that you're going to make between the two, painting around it. And so I think that's all I'm going to show you for now, if that's okay. And I'd like for you to work with your darks and do your background first, or paint your bird and do a little resist. When this is completely dry, I can do a little bit with the gel drawing lines, and you can see a few strokes and they will show up, okay? And I have these to work with if you need me to. All right, good luck, have fun. So I'm just gonna continue a little bit, and Larry gave me the idea of if you have the little shapes here on the shore, repeating it just by suggesting. I created a bit of an outline, but I want to get rid of that outline. So you see, you can get rid of the outline just by pushing the dark around those shapes. Now see, to finish this painting, I've got to go a little darker. I've got to move, this is this darker green from one side to the other side, and that might mean going back over the painting. Now this is the one that I did with a negative painting, so I was able to paint around my whites, and sometimes when you do a second coat you might start losing some of those lights, but let's just assume we're going to fix what we mess up. That's always my objective is to fix whatever I can to make it really work at the very end. Now I wanted to show that this had a little light reflection going on in the water. Now I'm going to switch over to the other side and keep working in the darks, and that means between the legs a little bit. And I do keep switching back some with lights, the light green and the dark, and trying to see this really is dark background compared to the lighter bird. Now there's some darks in those legs, so when this dries I don't want the green to run into the browns I'm going to add to the legs. So I'll just wait till that dries again and then come back in. Now because I have so much dark happening here, I want to keep some darks happening in between the legs here up to this point, because that needs to be, whatever color is over here does need to get repeated. It does take a lot of back and forth, and you really have to keep building your darks. And again, if it's too light, all you do is go back. Now I am painting around, and I have to do a little outline and then fill in. Okay, again moving across. And this side is darker, so I want to keep working with my green. And this is the green that I mixed with some purple to get very, very dark. Really like, if I can get these two to kind of match up here in the dark area, I really like this dark color. And I think this represents, it's a little browner in the image as I look at it, but I know that water is a reflection of what's around it. We often think, oh, well, the water is blue, but that's when we have a lot of sky that's reflected in the water, like our ocean waves that we did last week. So here, this is a swampier area. This is a Florida scene, and we obviously have more cypress and pine and palm trees that are probably reflecting around this body of water, which makes it very, very green. Again, I'm trying to suggest the reflections and make this look like I have painted behind the bird, not around the bird. Okay, so I'm still extending these strokes. This is my light brush and this is my dark brush. So I'm going to bring some of this dark down, and we're trying to just sort of finish this up so you can see how that's done. I guess I need to pay attention to the bottom of the painting because there is this branch across, but we want to have some dark water below it. So here is a little bit of light coming across, and right underneath the branch I want to make it very dark. And this would be like the branch is just sort of applied to the water. Now, something happens when you add layers of color. It blends all of that together. And I see a sense of an outline there, so I'm trying to add more and more paint. I think it's working pretty good up here. And establish where that shoreline is. Okay, and then I use my dark to come across. And because I have this on a little bit of a slope, I am getting some running down, which is just fine. I want to define these legs. Again, I've got to come back with them because they are darker. They're not, we shouldn't have this much light happening right there, even though we were talking about light on dark. I need to put a little more dark on this side and bring that across. And everywhere I see some dark, I like to show that that's happening as kind of a reflection from the landscape. And again, just these strokes. And then what happens here is that this continues. Let's put a little more dark right there. And I'm going to go a little darker around the head of the bird. The focal point really needs to be the beak, the head, the whole body of the bird. And so just coming back and bringing our attention right back to the bird is important. And I'm going to circle the bird again with more dark. And I want this to be a bit abstract, so the wet and wet is always going to help that situation. Dark up here. And sometimes if you don't want to lose all of your light spots, work with the dark and then just come back with, I'll do some light green here in a second, and it's still going to stay wet for a couple of minutes. And I'm watching where I put my finger down and capturing that. Oh, I lost a little end of it, so be careful. And coming in here, this is a little tiny shape, and it's captured now with this neck and keeping the light around the bird. But see how that helped the bird really pop. I'm going to do a little dry brush right here and get darker right here in this spot, and then go back to my light green and bring in some of that light green and a little dry brush for that nice bit of what do we call that
Looks like
stuff?
moss hanging down.
Moss hanging down. Thank you.
What color is the moss?
It's actually more of a tan. So I started with a tan, but sometimes you can see it as a little bit of a purple. I have seen it as, and it does have that feeling of hanging down. So, and I'm just going to dribble up into it a little bit, kind of a reverse of what's going on. And so there's some light here, but that tends to help me see what's going on with the background. I'm going to soften this up just by doing a bit of a wash over and repeating that over here. So I just sort of take it into the background. Let's do a log with some blue and brown to make a nice gray. Blue-brown always is a beautiful gray. And I do want to create a sense of texture on this log. Blue and brown. And then we want to touch up the feet just a little bit, and I'll use a round brush. Do want to make that a little darker with the bottom of that trunk. And there'll be some shadows that occur underneath the feet. Of the egret. And a little texture. Don't want to lose all the light that's up there though. Okay, and then again emphasizing the shadow there. I'm going to use a little bit more of the brown in the legs of the bird, and that means just a hint of where the bird has some lights and darks. We started with a bit of orange, but now we're darkening so that it doesn't just jump out quite as much as it was. And matter of fact, that's really a dark little spot, and I might have gotten my water a little darker than necessary at that one point. All right, so I want to also not lose all that bit of blue that was coming into the whiteness of the feathers that are coming down here, although I do think that's softened here. And I want to go just a little bit darker with a sense of a lavender blue. I'm having to use my warm side of my palette to make that, since I've got all my dark blues here, or greens there rather. I'm going to put just a little bit more purple blue right there, and a little bit more of a shadow here. Just calls for it, in my opinion. And then soften that up just a wee bit. And you can always soften with a touch of water along the edge. You don't always have to lift. But I have to keep that light. Oh, and you know, this is still a bit resist sitting there that I didn't get up. But I must wait for that to completely dry. The only other thing that I would tend to want to do is when it's completely dry, pop a little bit more of the dark in a few spots. But I think that essentially we are done. And I hope you have fun with your painting. All right.